I did not cry. I did not slam any doors. I sat across from my brother at the notary's office, folded my hands on the table, and waited. That moment, the one where everything changed, did not look like what you'd expect. There was no screaming, no dramatic exit, just a notary named Mr. Beliveau clearing his throat, sliding a document across a mahogany table, and my brother's face going the color of old snow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a family turns one daughter into a resource. I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in a house that smelled like cedar and old grudges. My parents, decent people by most measurements, had 2 children. My brother, Derek, and me. Derek was the dream. Hockey scholarships, charming smile, the kind of son who gets introduced first at dinner parties. I was the other one. The quiet one. The one who got straight A's, but somehow never earned the same applause. I didn't understand the math of it when I was young. I just knew that Derek's hockey equipment got replaced every season, and my dance lessons were cancelled after 2 years because money was tight. I knew that when Derek crashed our father's car at 19, it became a funny story. When I came home 30 minutes past curfew at 17, it became evidence of my character. I filed those things away. I didn't know yet that I was building a case. My grandmother, my mother's mother, a sharp, small woman named Nana Rose, who kept her savings in a credit union account, and her opinions unfiltered, saw it differently. She watched my parents for years. She watched them pour every resource, every softness, every benefit of the doubt into Derek like he was a vessel worth filling. She watched me learn to shrink. So when I turned 16, Nana Rose did something quiet. She opened a registered education savings plan for me. Just for me. She deposited into it every birthday, every Christmas, money from her pension, small amounts that accumulated the way quiet things do steadily, without fanfare. By the time I was finishing high school, there was just over $42,000 in that account. She told me about it the summer before she passed. We were sitting on her back porch in Dartmouth, drinking tea, watching the harbor. She pressed a folder into my hands, account statements, her written instructions, a letter. "This is yours," she said. "Not the family's. Yours, for university, for whatever life you build. Don't let them touch it." I didn't fully understand what she meant then. I do now. She passed the following October. I was 17. I cried for weeks in ways I hid from everyone. And then my parents found out about the account. I don't know how. Maybe they found the folder. Maybe Nana Rose's estate went through probate and a number surfaced. What I know is that 3 months after her funeral, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table with the particular tone she used when a decision had already been made, and she was simply narrating it to me. "Derek needs money for his 2nd season in the AHL development program," she said. "The fees are substantial. We think it makes sense to redirect your grandmother's education fund toward his career. It's an investment in the family." I was 17 years old. I said, "That money is for my education." She said, "We'll figure out your education. Derek's window is now." I didn't fight it. I was 17, I didn't have a lawyer, and I didn't yet know what I know now. That an RESP with a named beneficiary has legal protections, and that redirecting it without consent isn't just unfair, it requires specific conditions and, in some cases, is not legally permissible without the beneficiary's agreement. What I know now is that my parents convinced me to sign a document I didn't read carefully, one that effectively rolled the account under a family umbrella plan where they had control. I signed it. I went to Dalhousie on student loans. I worked 22 hours a week through my undergrad. I graduated with a business degree and $41,000 in provincial and federal student debt. Derek's AHL career lasted 14 months before a knee injury ended it. I filed that away too. Here's what I became, in the years after university. I became the family's financial brain, not by choice, exactly, but by capacity. I was good with money. I understood contracts. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in Halifax, and I was, by any reasonable measure, competent. So when my parents had questions about their mortgage refinancing, their RRSP withdrawals, their insurance, they called me. When Derek needed someone to co-sign a lease because his credit was poor, they called me. When the family needed someone to review a contractor's quote for the house renovation, they called me. I was not paid for any of this. I was thanked the way you thank a household appliance briefly, without eye contact. I want to be precise about something. I don't think my parents were malicious people. I think they were people who loved Derek more, and had never examined that fact closely enough to feel ashamed of it. I think they saw me as capable, and therefore required less. I think they had categorized me, early on, as the one who would be fine. The problem with being categorized as the one who will be fine is that people stop checking. The specific moment things escalated happened 18 months ago, when Derek's situation collapsed. Derek had, over the previous 4 years, accumulated significant debt. He had opened a small fitness business in Dartmouth that failed. He had 2 personal lines of credit totaling roughly $68,000. He had a mortgage on a condo he could no longer afford after separating from his partner. He owed CRA-backed taxes from 2 years of freelance income he had not properly reported. My parents told me about it over Sunday dinner, the way you might announce a logistical problem, not a catastrophe. Derek needs help, my father said. We're going to help him. I asked what kind of help. We're going to refinance the house, my mother said. But we need a cosigner. I put down my fork. You want me to cosign your refinanced mortgage to bail out Derek? We want the family to come together, my father said. I said no. That was in March. By July, they had hired a lawyer. Not to sue me, exactly. What they did was more specific and, in retrospect, more revealing of how they saw me. They had apparently been advised by someone that because I had signed that document at 17, redirecting Nana Rose's RESP, and because I had never formally disputed it, and because the original account had been restructured through a family plan, there was a theoretical argument that the residual funds money that had not been spent on Derek's hockey, and had remained untouched in the restructured plan, might be considered a family asset to which I had already consented to shared access. This was creative. I'll give whoever advised them that. Their lawyer sent me a letter in July, requesting that I attend a meeting to discuss the disposition of the legacy education fund established by the late Rose Comeau. The letter was careful and lawyered, and made no explicit demands. But the shape of it was clear. They were going to argue that the remaining balance, approximately $19,000, what was left after Derek's hockey, was theirs to direct toward his debt. I read the letter twice. I set it down on my kitchen counter. I made a cup of tea. And then I called my own lawyer. Her name is Claire Arsenault. She is 44 years old. She has short gray hair, and she has the particular energy of someone who has seen every version of this story, and is still, somehow, interested. I had retained her previously to help me structure a small investment property purchase. She was, as it turned out, exactly the right person for this. I told her everything, not just the letter, everything, the RESP, the document I signed at 17, the student loans, the co-signing requests, the years of unpaid financial advising, all of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you have the original RESP documentation? The account statements from your grandmother?" I did. I had kept Nana Rose's folder, all of it, in a fireproof box in my closet. The original account statements, her written instructions, her letter to me, the document I had signed at 17. Claire looked at the document I had signed and told me something that I want to say slowly, because it took me a while to understand its full weight. The document I had signed redirected my grandmother's RESP funds into a family plan. But the original RESP had named me as the sole beneficiary and subscriber. Under the Canada Education Savings Act and its associated regulations, certain protections attach to a named beneficiary. The document I signed at 17 had not been witnessed by an independent adult, had not included any disclosure about my rights, and had been signed while I was a minor, which in Nova Scotia meant it was potentially voidable. More importantly, Claire looked at the restructured family plan documents my parents had used, which I had not seen in full before, and found something. When the family plan was established, my parents had listed themselves as subscribers. But in the section describing the source of the initial contribution, they had written something that was either a mistake or an act of extraordinary carelessness. They had noted that the funds were transferred from a beneficiary-designated account held in trust for Claire Comeau, using my name as repayment for a family loan. There was no family loan. There had never been a family loan. They had, in writing, described the transaction as a repayment of a debt I had supposedly extended to the family, which meant, in a legal sense, they had acknowledged that the money had been mine, and had characterized its movement as a financial transaction, one that, if it were a loan repayment, would have required documentation, interest terms, and consent from me as the lender. Claire looked at me over her reading glasses. "They accidentally documented their own problem," she said. I want to describe what I felt in that moment, because it was not what I expected. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt very tired and very clear at the same time, like something that had been loud inside me for years had finally been given a name. We prepared carefully. Claire filed a formal challenge to the disposition of the family plan, on the basis that the original transfer had been made without valid consent, from a minor beneficiary, and had been internally documented as a loan repayment, meaning the funds were arguably still a liability the family plan owed. To me, not an asset they could direct elsewhere. We also did something else, something Claire suggested, and I agreed to after thinking about it for 3 days. I had, over the years of helping my family with their finances, seen things. I had helped my father structure his RRSP withdrawals. I had reviewed documents for the house refinancing 2 years prior. In the course of that, I had seen and, because I am an analyst, had noted certain inconsistencies. My father had, twice, withdrawn from a joint account he shared with my mother to cover Derek's debts without telling her. These withdrawals were not illegal, but they were relevant. And when Derek had applied for a business loan from a provincial small business program, my father had co-signed an application that described Derek's business as having a revenue history it did not actually have. That application had been approved. The loan had been drawn. This was more serious. Claire and I discussed it carefully. The question was not whether I had an obligation to report it. I was not a regulator, and I had not been a party to the application. The question was whether, in the context of a legal dispute about family assets, these documents were relevant to establishing the pattern of financial conduct I had been subjected to. They were. We did not threaten anyone. We did not send a letter saying comply or we report. What we did was include, in the formal legal response Claire filed, a comprehensive account of my financial history with the family, including the circumstances of the RESP transfer, the unpaid advisory work, the co-signing pressure, and a note that in preparing this response, counsel had become aware of certain other financial matters that might warrant review by the relevant authorities. We said we had no current intention of pursuing those matters, as our interest was in resolving the dispute over the education fund. That is not blackmail. That is disclosure. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday in October, at the offices of my parents' lawyer in downtown Halifax. 3rd floor, glass and wood aesthetic, the kind of office that is designed to make you feel like a smaller person than you are. I wore a blazer. I arrived exactly on time. I sat down. My parents were there. Derek was there. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Harrington, who looked like someone who had been doing estate disputes for 30 years, and had learned to show very little, was there. Claire sat beside me. Mr. Harrington opened the meeting. He outlined their position regarding the family education plan, and what they characterized as its disposition toward Derek's debt restructuring. He was measured and professional. He noted that I had previously indicated disagreement, and said they hoped to reach an informal resolution. My mother looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the expression that had always preceded the sentence. "We just want what's best for the family," she said. "We just want what's best for the family." I said nothing. Claire opened her folder. She walked Mr. Harrington through the original RESP documentation. She walked him through the voidable consent issue. She walked him through the language in the family plan that had described the transfer as a loan repayment. Mr. Harrington's expression did not change dramatically, but I watched him go still in the particular way that lawyers go still when they are recalibrating. Then Claire placed a second document on the table. It was a one-page summary of the loan application issue, not the full documentation, just the summary. She did not narrate it extensively. She simply said, "We've also identified some collateral matters that, as noted in our filed response, we have no current intention of escalating, as our focus remains on resolving the education fund dispute." Derek looked at the document. Then he looked at me. I want to tell you that I felt something sharp and righteous in that moment. I want to say I leaned back in my chair with the satisfaction of someone who had won. But what I actually felt was just very quiet, like standing in a Halifax harbor in November, when the wind drops for a moment, and everything is still. My father said, "We were trying to help Derek." I said, "I know." My mother said, "We didn't think you needed it." I said, "I know that too." Mr. Harrington asked for a brief recess. He and my parents' family stepped into the hallway. Claire and I sat at the table. She poured herself water. Outside the window, the harbor was gray and flat. They came back 14 minutes later. Mr. Harrington said that his clients were prepared to withdraw their claim to the education fund, to acknowledge the original transfer as having been made without adequate consent, and to agree to a structured repayment to me of the full original amount of the RESP $42,000 over 36 months, drawn from the equity in the family home. There was also, at Claire's insistence, a second agreement. That I would be formally released from any existing or implied financial obligations to the family, no future co-signing requests, no advisory services, no expectation of contribution to Derek's debts. It was written down. It was signed. Derek did not look at me when he signed. My mother looked at me for a long time, and I couldn't entirely read her expression. I think there was something in there that might have been recognition. I don't know. My father, as we were leaving, said, "You didn't have to do it this way." I stopped. I thought about 17-year-old me at a kitchen table, signing a document I didn't understand, because the people who were supposed to protect my interests had decided someone else's interests mattered more. I said, "Dad, I did it the only way you left available." And I walked out into the Halifax autumn. And I did not look back. Here is what I want you to understand, because this is not a story about revenge. Or, it is, maybe, a little bit. But mostly, it's a story about documentation. About the $42,000 lesson that Nana Rose tried to teach me on a back porch in Dartmouth, that things written down matter, that your name on a document is worth something, that you should never sign what you haven't read, and you should always keep what's yours. I have the first payment sitting in my TFSA now. I'm putting it toward a down payment on a property here in Halifax. Something small, something mine. Every month when the next payment clears, I think of Nana Rose. She left me money for an education. Turns out I got one, just not quite the way she planned. Tell me in the comments if someone in your family ever treated you like a resource rather than a person. I want to hear your story. And if you haven't yet, go check whatever you signed. Go read the fine print. I'll see you in the next one.